We have Lisa Hill coming to us from Adelaide, Australia in the middle of the night. I believe it is 1:30 a.m. there. So we really appreciate Lisa Hill being here today with us. So Lisa is a professor of politics at the University of Adelaide. She is research chair of the Center for Public Integrity and director of the Democracy, Security, Trust, and Integrity program at the Stretton Institute for Public Policy. She currently writes about political theory, the history of political thought, electoral law, and Australian politics. Lisa is the author of many books and papers, including some that are highly relevant for us today, Stoicism and the Western Political Tradition, and Stoic Cosmopolitanism and the Birth of Universal Rights. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you so much for being with us today.
You can unmute.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we've got you now.
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you for having me, and I'll do my best to seem awake and alert. But even though I'm a night owl, this is very late for me. I think I should get cracking because you have a tight schedule today, so I better share my screen. I have some very dense slides. They're not necessarily for you, so I don't forget what I want to say. But if people want to have access to the slides later, especially some of the Stoic sources, they can refer to those slides and then find exactly where I was talking about when I give a quote or an important goblet from one of the Stoics. Now, my talk's about the Stoic tradition of engaged citizenship. And you might be able to see there that I have a picture of Marcus Aurelius. Can you see the picture in the corner of Queen Elizabeth? Hang on. Queen Elizabeth I. Then good. Down at the bottom, I have just some average citizens, some attending the Australian Parliament and some just being good citizens, helping out in ways that we might not think of as civic or political. But I just want to signal from the outset that for the Stoic, these are all forms of engaged citizenship, being a good person, tending the assembly, or leading in a Stoic way. And I know that Marcus Aurelius is often thought of as the most important exemplar of Stoic principles in terms of a powerful person, but it's little known that Elizabeth I was also influenced by Stoicism, and that's for the latest work I've been doing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Elizabeth's Stoic influences towards the end in terms of her statecraft and her concept of just rule. Something I want to talk about today is the common misconception that the Stoics turned away from civic engagement. So this might be an unfamiliar argument to some people, but within the scholarship on Stoicism, this is a really common claim that Stoicism encouraged political quiescence, that it entailed passivity of an extreme kind. It's ultimately negative. Sarah Hutton actually says that the ultimate route to freedom is suicide for the Stoics, which I think is an extreme position to take. It certainly isn't. It's absolutely the last resort, and they don't go around advising everyone to do it left, right, and centre. They advise people to get involved in politics. But I've just given you some names there: P.A. Brunt, F.H. Sambach, and there's in that article at the bottom by myself and Mahendra Chitrarasu, we talk about all the different scholars that think that Stoicism had no political program, that they didn't care about the outside world, that they weren't other regarding and they weren't outward facing. And this is really common claim within the literature, that Stoicism was just there to teach about internal regulation. But prima facie, we know that they were interested in politics. For example, look at all the titles that we know were written by Stoics and were of a highly political nature. Now, we don't have access to all those sources, unfortunately. We only have a record that they existed, but some of them we do have access to. The work of Cicero, some of which are highly Stoic. We have the Meditations, we have the work of Epictetus, we have Seneca's works, we have Jimmy Rufus. We've got a heap of stuff that tells us how interested in politics they were. And so those titles tell us that they were interested in the theory and practice of justice, the proper use of power. They talked a lot about statecraft, about governance, about legislation. They are very interested in constitutional taxonomy, public decision-making, and especially our obligations to others, particularly the poor and the marginalized. And these are all topics central to political life. And these things all mattered to the Stoics, and they mattered vitally to them. Now, I think that claims of Stoic quiescence are related to the mistaken belief that their preoccupation with achieving the eternal mental state of apatheia and ataraxia made them indifferent to events outside themselves, including the welfare of others. And I think it's further assumed that they conceive of the attainment of ataraxia and apatheia as sort of personal ends in themselves. It's just for me, to make me feel good about myself. But not only was Stoicism political and civic, but the achievement of that internal state of being calm and indifferent to things that didn't matter had direct political applications, as I'll explain in a minute. So I want to problematize this inside-outside distinction that people sometimes talk about in the literature. Even people I work with think that Stoicism is just there so that people can console themselves and feel good internally. The inside state is regulated and trained so that you can deal with the outside world. It has an outward-facing purpose. So our first hint that the Stoics are political is their cosmopolitanism. It would be very hard to be acquainted with Stoic cosmopolitanism and to then come to the conclusion that they didn't care about other people. To be a cosmopolite is highly political, and it's extremely demanding. It's morally demanding. It makes demands on us in terms of our obligations to other people. And I would say that cosmopolitanism is the sovereign idea in Stoic political thought, and from it flows all of its other political and social commitments. Now, they were the first to systematically promulgate the politically radical idea, and it's hard to overstate how radical the Stoics were in their time, when people of marginal status, low social status, were treated so badly. They promulgated the idea that we're all natural siblings and that entitlements are universal, equal, and natural, applying to everyone, everywhere. If that's true, as the Stoics say, if I'm going to be a Stoic and I'm going to be a cosmopolite, these entitlements that others have impose duties on me. So we already know that the cosmopolite is going to have duties to other people. The capacity for reason, coupled with the desire to make moral decisions, renders everyone an end in themselves. Everyone has reason. They are therefore an equal unit of value regardless of their secondary characteristics or relationship to us personally, regardless of their social distance to me. It doesn't matter if I know them. It doesn't matter if they're a foreigner or from an out-group. They have equal standing. So it's egalitarian and impartial. And this is because Zeus gave each human a particle of his own intelligence, which is reason. It's a spark of the divine mind fire. Everyone has it. It's common to everyone. This connects us all as spiritual siblings. We're all citizens of the cosmopolis, the single polity. But we also have an allegiance to our terrestrial polis. So we're members of two commonwealths. So it's tricky for the Stoic. We have this one vast and truly common state that goes wherever the sun goes, the path of the sun. But the other is the polis to which we've been assigned by the accident of birth. And that's just my local city-state or my nation or my community. But the most important one, the greatest and most authoritative city of all, is the cosmopolis. That one comes first. That's the most important. So everyone has standing. Everyone's entitled to equal consideration. And the Stoics radically rejected discrimination based on the accidents of fortune. As Seneca insisted, and I think these words are very beautiful, kindly remember that he whom you call your slave sprang from the same stock, is smiled upon by the same skies, and on equal terms with yourself breathes, lives, and dies. Even though he may be stationed as a slave, his soul may be that of a freeman. Seneca's saying there, don't get a big idea of yourself because someone else is a slave and you're not. and you're a highborn person. It's an accident of birth. And Seneca also says that not only could your soul have flown into a body of a slave, a person is a slave probably because of a wrong, not only because of an accident, but of a wrong done to them. So don't get a big idea of yourself. So the claims of quietism that are there in the literature don't stand up to the demands of Stoic cosmopolitanism. Our mode of life begins with a natural principle, namely the facts of natural community. We are actually born to care about the welfare of other people. We're formed by nature for benefiting others. So when a person contributes to the general weal, the general welfare, the general good, the general flourishing, Marcus says, he has done what he was constituted for. It's just natural. You almost can't avoid it if you're a reasonable person. And since we are designed by nature to safeguard and protect our fellows, it follows from this natural disposition to care about our fellows and to look after them, that the wise man, the Stoic sage, will engage in politics and government. And the reason that the sage will be involved in politics and government is that you can help more people if you get to where the power is at, to where the laws are being made, to where the action is. Get where the action is, get where the power is, get where the system is run, and you can help more people. But you can be a cosmopolite and a sage doing anything in life, in your everyday life. But the best way to cut to the chase is to get some power. So we have these unavoidable duties to each other. We have duties to defend and protect the dignity and equality and welfare of others. And we should be civically engaged unless we're prevented by circumstance. Those Stoics without formal power sought to influence those who did have formal power, or else simply enacted the cosmopolis unilaterally. And I'll explain in a minute how you can do that unilaterally. But within terrestrial states, some Stoics wielded power directly. We know that. And they sort of sought to bring the terrestrial and the divine commonwealths into alignment. Marcus Aurelius tried to do that, for example. He was the most powerful person on earth during his reign. And he tried to bring the terrestrial and the divine states into alignment with each other. Seneca tells us the best course of action for a person is to occupy yourself with practical matters. Don't be quietist. Don't be sitting around contemplating your navel and wondering, how can I make myself feel calm and happy? Think about others. Think about the practical world, the management of public affairs, the duties of the citizens. Make yourself useful to your countrymen and all mortals. And I've highlighted all mortals, not just the people that are your conspecifics. Make yourself useful to everybody, and thus serve to the best of your ability the interests of both the public and of the individual. Just spread your net wide and do the most you can. Your interest must be with the community. Now, they saw the sphere of politics and civic activity as radiating out beyond the local polis, as I've mentioned, and participating in this broader realm of politics and public life could include, but it wasn't limited to, the following things. So I sort of looked through all the text and saw all the different things that a politically engaged person could do to make themselves useful and to be a good cosmopolite. You could hold public office, or it could be an advisor of a political leader, or just an advisor of your fellow citizens. You could work as a magistrate. You could attend assembly, just turn up to the parliament and just listen to what's going on and be an informed person. You can enlist in military service. You can train the young for political service. So arguably that's what I do as a political scientist. I train people for public office, and a lot of my former students are now ministers in the federal government. It could also mean exemplifying Stoic virtue, just being a good Stoic and making a good example of yourself. You could write morally beneficial books. You could theorize about politics. These are all activities that benefit other people, not just individuals, but the whole of the human race, through the use of our intellect, our voice, and our counsel. Or you could be civically engaged and a cosmopolite by unilaterally exercising the action-focused Stoic virtues of prudence and wisdom, self-control and moderation, courage, an extremely important virtue, and justice, which is arguably the sovereign virtue in the Stoic lexicon of virtue. And why wouldn't you, say the Stoics? Because virtue is synonymous with eudaimonia, happiness, with the good life, Being virtuous is having a good life and living a good life and being happy. Seneca says our duty is to stretch forth the hand to the shipwrecked sailor, point the way to the wanderer, and share a crust with the starving. It is natural and right for all of us to become proficient in virtue and acquire understanding and self-control and courage and justice, so that each of us might live justly and be a good citizen. So just when you're out and about in your life and a person extends kindness to you, they're a complete stranger. The example that strikes me is one day I was in the hospital car park. It was a 40-degree day here because it's hot in Adelaide. We're on the desert. And I was having trouble getting the ticket machine to work. And I needed to see my son who'd been rushed into hospital. And a man came from all the way over in the blazing heat. He'd had some time left on his ticket to give it to me. And he mustn't have been having a very good day himself. He obviously had just come from the hospital. And he'd come to give me his ticket. And why should I pay when he's got 20 hours left on his 24-hour ticket? And he gave that to me. He was entering the cosmopolis. He was enacting the cosmopolis. He was extending friendship and siblinghood to me by acting virtuously and in another regarding way, even though he was very hot. It was a long way to walk. Whenever we extend kindness and goodness and help someone out that we don't know particularly, that's when we're bringing the cosmopolis into existence. We bring it into existence by our actions. So, as Seneca tells us, it's not merely the person who brings forward candidates, defends the accused, or votes for peace and war, who does good service to the state, the important people with a lot of power. Whoever admonishes young men or instills virtue in their minds, so teaches young people to be virtuous. I apologise for the very gendered nature of the discourse. That's them, not me. Lays hold upon those that are rushing wildly in pursuit of money and luxury. Remind people money is not everything, luxury is not everything, and draws them back to the law of nature, thinking about the welfare of other people. Doing all those things is performing a public service, even in your private life. And the mark of a wise person, the person who lives in accordance with nature, is that they direct every impulse to the common interest and are guilty of no unsocial act. Do not be unsociable. I often think when I've parked my car in a narrow street and there aren't many parks in my neighbourhood, I get out and I check. I was thinking, if I parked more thoughtfully and in a more social way, another person can squeeze in here. And I sometimes use that phrase, I've got to go out and move the car. I've parked in a rather unsocial way and I need to make sure someone else can squeeze in. So you can be civically engaged just by exemplifying virtue, teaching virtue, and being other regarding. Our duty is to help anyone who needs it, regardless of their social location. And further, and this is a really important point about the Stoics, and it goes to my point about how demanding being a cosmopolite is and being a Stoic is. Our duties to strangers and foreigners are just as binding as those to our intimates and compatriots. We might not feel the same way about them, but the Stoics understand that, but you must act the same way towards them. Rufus tells us the person who is unjust to strangers sins against Zeus. Denying that foreigners have the same entitlements as our compatriots and our kin and our friends is a violation of natural law, one that would destroy the universal brotherhood of mankind. And when that's annihilated, everything falls apart. This rule applies equally to everyone, everywhere, even our enemies. So there's quite a lot of nice quotes in the Stoic texts about how we should treat our enemies. And this is really a hard test. But Musonius says it's ignoble and mindless to believe that we'll be scorned by others unless we destroy every enemy we meet. It is wrong and contrary to the laws of humanity to prevent foreigners from enjoying the advantages of your city. Give them your fire, give them shelter, give them your water, give them some food. Now, the Stoics did allow for withdrawal from formal terrestrial politics if something obstructed a person's involvement. You don't always have to be really out there in the Sturm und Drang and the hustle and bustle of politics. It's not for everybody. And some of us might have an excuse. These would include an unsuitable temperament, poor health, a poor capacity to influence. You might not be a very convincing person. Or there might be other reasons concerning political circumstances beyond your control, such as the moral character of the state that might be beyond help, or the worthiness of the people that you served. But even if we do withdraw from the terrestrial polis, we must still serve others in order to fulfill our obligations to the universal cosmopolis. Those Stoics that didn't wield power directly nevertheless encouraged their pupils to acquire and use it virtuously. So Seneca tells us that neither Zeno, Cleanthes, nor Chrysippus entered into public life, but not one failed to urge others to do so. In forced or voluntary retirement, it is of course required, says Seneca, that a man should benefit his fellow men, many as he can, if not a few, those nearest to him, but you've got to help. For when he renders himself useful to others, he engages in public affairs. So he's there saying it's public act to help others. Now, of course, civic engagement isn't just for the highborn or for those with institutional power. It's for everybody, and that's why everybody should study philosophy, because philosophy is the way to learn to be virtuous. So this is a very important thing about Stoicism. Everyone should be educated in philosophy and the art of virtue. And what's nice about this is that they were the first people to argue systematically that women should be educated, slaves should be educated, the poor, people in rags should be educated. Everybody should be educated. Wisdom is open to all, admits all, invites all. The freeborn and the freedman, the slave and the king, the exile, the family or fortune determines its choice. It's satisfied with the naked human being. If you're a human being and you have a faculty of reason, you should be educated. Women too. And Musonius is very big on that women too, daughters too, should receive an education in philosophy. But Seneca talks a lot about it as well. For this reason, Stoic classes were actually held in the open. That's why they taught from the Stoic porch, so that anyone could attend. And the highest born often sat beside beggars in their rags, particularly in Zeno's time. So anyone and everyone can learn to be a good cosmopolite. And just by exercising, for example, impartial kindness and hospitality to strangers, they are civic acts, and they can be exercised by anyone, including those without a lot of formal power. But it will be becoming quite crystal clear now that Stoicism doesn't invite quiescence. It is extremely demanding. It's extremely demanding. We have to help and comfort others, including strangers and even our enemies. And that's why we cultivate apatheia and ataraxia. It immunizes the Stoic adherent against public opinion and all forms of bias and prejudice, whether in the forms of norms or laws. And this is something I really like about Stoicism. It says, forget peer pressure, forget bad laws, forget bad orders. Convention and public opinion are inferior to the higher laws of Zeus. So the Stoic has to ignore any elements of a person or a situation that aren't morally relevant when they're deciding how to engage. You don't come across someone poor and say, well, I don't really want to deal with that, I'm scared of them. It's not a morally relevant detail about them. They're a human being, you must help them. This is an enemy. This is someone from an outgroup or an outcast. That's not morally relevant to the Stoic. And they were concerned with getting just terrestrial rule in accordance with the egalitarian and impartial laws of Zeus. So that's why they were averse to arrogance, elitism, particularism, tyranny, and absolutism. Now, they do say we mustn't lust for power. That's bad. That's a bad sign that you just want it for yourself. You should get it, but then you should wield it. You wield whatever power you've got in the terrestrial state in a manner that reflects the moral standards of the greater state. And we saw that Marcus Aurelius did that. Epictetus answers the rhetorical question, what place should I have in the state? He answers, whatever place you can have, while maintaining your fidelity and self-respect. And if you lose those qualities, then what good would you be to others? And quite right, what good would you be? So this Stoic emphasis on emotional self-control and internal self-management had highly political, outward-facing purposes. We condition our emotions not just to live an insulated life of tranquil pleasure, but to enable us to live and act for the benefit of the others. Emotional self-control through apatheia and ataraxia, tranquility, is necessary both to perceive the good. I need to be calm and be indifferent to things that aren't important so I can see what is the right thing to do, and thereafter have the wisdom, the will, and especially the courage to act calmly and impartially for others, even in defiance of established norms or bad orders or unjust positive laws. So not everything is indifferent or beyond our control. Moral choice is always within our control. So the Stoic sage is going to be immune to received opinion because they have developed the moral maturity, courage, and intellectual, emotional, and physical self-control to think independently and act without fear of the consequences. And that's a really hard thing to do. It takes a lot of Stoic ascesis training to do that. But I love this. It's absurd and morally immature to allow fear of or weariness from insults to keep us from pursuing virtue. Otherwise, we would fail to perform many needful things and refuse to face our public and private duties. Who cares what people say about you? Think of the way the suffragette women fought for their rights and were excoriated and ridiculed. Or even think about the way John Stuart Mill was ridiculed in the press, or the way African-American activists were ridiculed when they were fighting for their rights and insulted. You have to keep going and not care about that stuff if you know you're on the right track. So Stoicism is morally and psychologically demanding. And the first step towards being publicly useful is to have your virtues and your emotions and your reactions under control, especially fear and anger. These are two things the Stoics really want us to get under control. Anger causes you to behave badly, and fear will prevent you from having courage. So, along with their advice on how to treat others and rule well, they insist on the duty to resist tyrants and bad rulers. And there's this guy, Nero. Seneca says, I have already had the good fortune to win the displeasure of the wicked, which is proof enough of my uprightness. It sounds like he's boasting. He's not. He stood up to quite a few of them, 3 emperors at least, got mad at him. But Nero, in the end, was the death of him. It's wrong, says Epictetus, to flatter the tyrant who calls upon you to say something that's unworthy of you, and that's brave of him, a former slave. And Musonius tells us we need to defy the ruler or despot who orders us to do something wicked, unjust, or shameful. He says it's not disobedience when the order is a bad order. For example, he tells women, if your father forbids you from having an education, you're allowed to defy your father. So the absorption with internal psychic management and the achievement of these ideal states of apatheia and ataraxia were signs that the Stoics had turned inwards, away from people, away from the concerns of the polis. That was part of their deliberate strategy to turn towards it, and actually to run very fast towards it, and even radically to bring the cosmopolis into existence. And now I'm thinking about Elizabeth I, and she really understood the importance of personal ascesis, training or mental discipline, which the Stoics talk about a lot. That training enables political leaders to perform their duties diligently. And Elizabeth I, who'd been through a lot, especially in her early days, relied on Stoicism a lot to steady her, not just to have the internal regulation, but also she used Stoicism to develop her principles of statecraft. Here's her godson later on reporting on her tendency to use Stoic teachings in translation, especially Seneca's wholesome counsel to calm her mood. She used to have this double translation method where she'd translate it out of the original language, Latin in this case, into English, and then out of English back. So it was like doing jigsaw puzzles, but the words themselves substantively calmed her as well. Her Highness was wont to soothe her ruffled temper with reading every morning when she'd been stirred to passion at the council, because she got very wound up by her advisors, the men constantly pushing her around and advising her in a way that she didn't necessarily agree with. And things had overthrown her gracious disposition. She'd go back and do her translation. She did much admire Seneca's wholesome advising. When the soul's quiet was flown away and I saw much of her translating thereof. She wanted to get to that mental state of ataraxia and apatheia, and she wanted to release herself from the encumbrance of strong emotion. Cicero, quoting the Stoics, says we have to eradicate our disturbing emotions and desires, school ourselves to feel no pain, no anger, no compulsion, no hindrance. Don't let your emotions push you around. And this allows us to secure both moral stability and dignity of character. And Elizabeth in particular tried to get her anger under control. And she knew she had a kind of anger issues. She worked very hard to overcome them. But there were people constantly provoking her as well. She translated Seneca's Epistle 107 after Darnley's murder and Mary Stuart's elopement with Lord Bothwell. That really gave her a terrible scare and wound her up to an extreme degree. And that is the classic statement of Stoic forbearance. And underlining that her Stoic ascesis had an important, highly political application, she told the Parliament, and this was a Parliament at a time that were trying to get her to hurry up and execute Mary Stuart. And she's like, oh, just give me a minute here. It's a big thing for me to do this. And she said, look, with regard to her temper, I have always had care to do as Augustus Caesar, who being moved to offence before he attempted anything was willed to say over the alphabet. She said she did that too. And I trust that that has caused me to be a person that my people don't repent themselves for having as their prince. Now, that story comes originally from Plutarch, but it refers to the Stoicism of Augustus as taught to him by Athenodorus. So she wanted to get self-control, she wanted to get calm, and she wanted to get her anger under control and not to lash out at people. And she talked a lot about not getting upset about the little things. Don't get upset about these small matters. It's like whining that thou art dashed with mire or troubled with a throng. Meaning, I go out in the mud and it's crowded in the streets of London, which she often did. She often did it to see if she was still loved, or she did it to see if she would be attacked, actually, or if she could, and she'd go out to talk to the people. She said, that's ridiculous. Of course it's going to be muddy, and of course it's going to be crowded. Most things in life, grievous woes, pale disease, and sad old age, are beyond our control, but we can control our reaction to these events. In this rotten bower, our life we must lead. To shun these things we cannot, to despise them lieth in our power, to not care about it. So she prayed to God to preserve her in a quiet and tranquil state and make her steadfast in freedom of mind. She was a Christian, but she combined a lot of Christian teachings with the Stoic teachings so that she could rule well. And I'll just close on this other teaching she got from Stoicism, but there were a gazillion she got from Stoicism. It was a fantastic project. I enjoyed doing it. But she was very big on the Stoic virtue of clemency. Now, in her time, clemency was still considered to be a female virtue, or kind of a maternal virtue. But she accepted the Stoic account of clemency. The Stoics had long since said that is a gender-neutral virtue. It's a quality of the powerful, and it's a quality that men and women share in common. It's a political emotion. And she prayed that she could rule in care and love and not with fear or severity of the sword. The Stoics say it's shared equally by men and women, and it's a sign of strength. And in fact, the more powerful the person concerned, the more it was required. And she takes this lesson from Seneca. The quality of mercy is important for everyone, but in rulers it has an especial comeliness, inasmuch as with them it finds more to save and exhibits itself among ampler opportunities for how small the harm the cruelty of a private citizen can do. But when princes rage, there is war. She understands. When I lose my temper, it really hurts people. And so she says, mercy is necessary in all men, but especially honourable in rulers. So I'll just close with this point that political engagement is the Stoic rule, not the exception, and it's a duty that applies not just to the powerful, but to everyone. But in order to do it properly, you have to be emotionally regulated. And that's why they were interested in apatheia and ataraxia, so you could be a good person. And I do want to stress that suicide is only the last resort, says Marcus, if you canst not win thy way. But first try to win thy way, say the Stoics. Try really hard. Do everything you can, even endanger your own life, and don't care about that if it helps people. So I really disagree quite strongly with that claim that, that's the way out for the Stoics. The Stoics say, win thy way. And I better stop there because I think I'm running out of time.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Lisa. And everyone in the audience, will you please join me in giving a round of applause to Lisa for all of these amazing insights? I think so many people were completely unaware that Elizabeth I practiced Stoicism or was influenced by Stoic principles. So that was very eye-opening, along with a lot of the other insights you presented about cosmopolitanism. And I have seen a lot of questions in the chat for you, Lisa. So audience members, you can continue to enter your questions. I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So a question that came up for me is when we're presenting cosmopolitanism to other people who are not familiar with Stoic principles. So the Stoics, as you've presented it here, started with the idea of divine rationality, that we're all members of the same family. How would we share this idea? How would we communicate this principle to people who, are very off-put by the notion of Zeus? Is there another way we can explain this? Is there a different underlying idea where we can say, hey, everybody is deserving of our love and respect?
Do you mean to say if you don't want to present it as a religious idea and a spiritual idea? Yeah, and I see your point. It can't, because it's a religion. Stoicism was just both a political school of thought and a religion. But they were also materialists. That's the weird thing about the Stoics.
So how would we put this in
I would
terms?
sort of stress that, sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to say, if we're presenting this to other people who have no clue about, Stoicism, Zeus, materialism, how would we, I mean, is there a way to share this with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can present it without mentioning the theology, without mentioning Stoic theology. You can just talk about Stoic internationalism, that our shared humanity, that we all share in reason. You don't have to say it's divine, but you just talk about what we have in common, which is our willingness and our desire to make moral decisions, our natural sociality, our natural sociability. Cicero talks about the fact that we have, and all the Stoics, this natural impulse to love our children, for example. This shows that we're naturally sociable. So I guess I would do it that way, and in the way that all the UN instruments do as well.
So going back to the ideal of nature as well.
Yeah, it's in our nature. We're essentially sociable creatures. We're fundamentally social and we can't be without each other.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so a related question from Rob McLuhan. How can we promote the idea of cosmopolitanism to other people and help others to see all of these connections? So, taking this idea out to other people is obviously a challenge. What are maybe some advice or some ways that we can help others to understand this?
Well, it's by teaching that everyone is an end in themselves. Everyone is a person of standing. Everyone has their own dreams. It's that idea that they were the first people to develop. Other humans aren't there for your use value. They have their own dreams, their own plans about their future, their own plan for their life. But it's a very hard lesson to teach right now because of ultra nationalism, which is growing. Nations are becoming more and more inward looking. They're becoming more protective of their borders. They're becoming less hospitable. But it's getting people to recognize the fundamental humanity of every single human being. And that's something that's that's hard to teach if a person doesn't naturally see the world that way. And also, there's no good in telling somebody you should naturally see the world that way when they don't. They don't naturally see the world that way. I mean, Brittany, how do you imagine that we'd be able to teach that principle?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the hardest thing. It goes back to, the what's up to you and what isn't. Other people's opinions are not up to you, which is something we saw Marcus Aurelius reminding himself of all the time. So to me, earlier today, Tim Laban mentioned being a role model. So I think the more that we can model this ourselves in our actions, and you as a teacher, Lisa, sharing that lesson with people who go on to become ministers and things like this. I mean, we can only do what we can do, right?
We can model good behavior, we can be kind to strangers, and we can understand that everybody has their own story. I often feel like in my phone, I carry around $5 notes so that when people on the street ask me for money, I have it and don't make a big show of it. And to me, the real trick in that exchange is not acting as though it's noblesse oblige and not acting as though that person owes me anything. They don't even owe me a thank you. It's the least I can do. And at Christmas last year, a woman in the street said to me, "Have you got any money? Have you got any spare money?" I said, "I sure have." And I gave her $10. And then as I was walking back from the shops, she was on the other side of the road and she just waved at me. And I just thought, oh, she's waving at me. There's that lady I know. And I was thinking, oh, finally, I got that right. I got that exchange right. That you're a person, I'm a person, and I'm the one that just happens to have the spare $10. That's when we're both in the cosmopolis. She knows she's entitled to the $10. She doesn't feel grateful. She just feels glad to see me.
hmm As Marcus Aurelius says, it's just a natural action, just the overflow of being a human. It's nothing to get puffed up with pride about.
Exactly, exactly. And the other thing that I'm trying to avoid feeling is shame. Shame that I've got a wallet full of fivers. Just saying, look, this was the accident of my birth. And the least I can do is just spread it around and not make a big deal out of it.
Right. And again, Marcus or his role model, Antoninus Pius, he talked about how he would just use things as they came and not feel guilty about having nice things. So that's a great point.
Yeah. Another time I was walking down the street and I'd been giving out some fivers. And there was a guy in front of me with all his gear in a shopping trolley. I said, oh, and he stopped to talk to me. He said, I said, do you need some money? He said, no, I'm fine, thanks. Someone just gave me some money. And I was thinking, 2 goals this week. He answered that in a very egalitarian, independent way as another citizen of the cosmopolis. Now I'm good right now.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm.
Well, we also have a question from Shannon P that I wanted to put to you. So she's asking, how do you, as a cosmopolite, engage with people with whom you disagree deeply? How can we have those conversations in a very stoic and cosmopolitan way?
That's very hard, isn't it? If it's one thing to disagree, but in politics, sometimes you feel a person's opinions are wicked. And projecting that that's how you feel about it is not going to help you. It's not going to win the way. You must be patient. And being a woman that's a bit older, I spend a lot of my time being patronized as well. So having to try and argue my point while being patronized and contradicted and talked over, it takes a lot of self-control. And reminding yourself, everybody's got their story. Everybody's got their story. They might have a reason for why they think this way. And to try and get them to talk about why they look at it that way. And try to be patient with hearing it that way. But losing your temper is the worst thing that can happen, of course, as the Stoics say. And also being frightened of them not liking you. That's too bad. You would keep arguing but not show any fear, but you should not show contempt for people's people having different opinions from you, their opinions may be born out of their own fear, and probably are. A lot of opinions I disagree with are from people that are fearful.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just moving on to one more question, I think, for our last couple of minutes here. This is from Jim Goddard, and he says, I wonder what Lisa's view is of Cato the Younger as an example of Stoic engaged citizenship. I'm thinking particularly of his opposition to Julius Caesar's brutality towards non-Romans. Would you want to say anything about that?
No, I think he might want to say something about it. But of course, we're supposed to resist those that are inhospitable to outsiders. That's our job. And this is actually very tough now because everybody seems to hate on outsiders now and hate on people from out groups. But it's our job now to stand up for people that are pushed outside and to be brave for them. So, I mean, that's being a Stoic, isn't it?
And just to finish up, do you have any parting words when you have a student who tells you, Professor Hill, I'm taking over this job in the government. Do you have any words that you tell them to bear in mind as they go about this form of engaged citizenship?
Yeah. When you have power, that brings with it responsibility. And the reason to have power is to help people, not to serve your own interests. And party political politics especially causes you to forget that. And sometimes I see my students not behaving in a way of which I would necessarily approve because of party political politics. So, but something I always teach my parents and my students is something that I learned from my father. My father was completely uneducated. He left school at 12. He didn't do well at school, but he was an original thinker. And he did not care if he was the only person in the room that thought something. He was completely immune to peer pressure and to social convention. And it was such a privilege to be raised by that person. And because I'm not afraid to be the only person that thinks something, I couldn't give a hoot if I'm the only person. My dad would just laugh. And I noticed my son, even from an early age, kind of inherited that gene almost. And so that's the advice I give all my students. And so even though I give courses that aren't on statecraft, I do slyly give statecraft lessons. And one of the things I teach them is don't be afraid to be the only person that thinks something. There's a pretty good chance, as it was in the case of my father, that you're the only person that thinks something, but you're the only person that's right today. So be that person and don't care. Don't care about it.
Thank you so much. I love that. And I know the audience has appreciated your talk. I've been looking at some of the comments here. So thank you so much, Lisa Hill, for joining us in the middle of the night from Australia.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks everyone for coming along. I'm going to bed now.